A racist restaurant owner named Charles Montgomery dismisses James and Vanessa Carter, a successful black couple, as they come to celebrate their 10th anniversary at his renowned establishment, Maison Royale. Little does he know, the Carters are not ordinary guests, and by the time Charles learns who they really are, it's too late to undo the damage. What forces Charles to confront the consequences of his actions? Before we dive into this powerful story, comment below where you're watching from today, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories of justice, transformation, and hope. The golden glow of crystal chandeliers bathed Maison Royale in a warm, inviting light. The restaurant, nestled in the heart of the city, was a beacon of exclusivity and sophistication, attracting the wealthy and powerful to its polished marble floors and tables adorned with pristine linens. The soft hum of classical music, punctuated by the occasional clink of fine china, created an ambiance of luxury that was both intoxicating and intimidating. James and Vanessa Carter stepped through the grand double doors, their presence commanding attention. Vanessa, an award-winning architect, moved with the grace of someone accustomed to admiration. Her emerald green dress flowed elegantly as she walked, her natural curls framing a face radiant with joy. James, her husband of 10 years, followed close behind. A well-known philanthropist, his calm confidence was unmistakable. He wore a tailored navy suit, his dark brown skin glowing under the warm lights. It was their 10th wedding anniversary, and they had chosen Maison Royale as the backdrop for their celebration, a testament to how far they had come together. The restaurant's reputation preceded it, a symbol of refined taste and achievement. For James and Vanessa, the night was a chance to honor their journey and revel in the fruits of their hard work. As they approached the host's desk, Charles Montgomery, the restaurant's owner, stood at the entrance, his sharp gaze sweeping the room. In his early 60s, Charles exuded a quiet authority. His salt and pepper hair was impeccably combed back, and his tailored black suit spoke of wealth and control. Yet, as his eyes fell on James and Vanessa, something shifted in his demeanor. His practiced smile faltered for a split second, returning only after he caught himself. Charles was a man of calculated precision, and to him every detail mattered, especially the clientele of Maison Royale. He had built the restaurant into a sanctuary for the elite, carefully curating its reputation for sophistication. But as he watched James and Vanessa approach, his mind raced with silent judgments. Despite their impeccable attire and demeanor, he found himself questioning whether they fit the image he had so meticulously crafted for his establishment. "Good evening," Charles greeted them, his tone smooth but devoid of warmth. "Do you have a reservation?" "Yes, under Carter," James replied, his deep voice steady and polite. Charles nodded, turning to the maitre d'. "Check for Carter, please," he said, though his voice carried an undertone of suspicion. As they waited, Charles's discerning eye lingered on the couple. He noted the confidence in James's posture, the elegance in Vanessa's movements. Still, an unease gnawed at him, one he couldn't quite justify. The maitre d' returned moments later with a slight bow. "Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, your table is ready." "Right this way," Charles said, gesturing them forward. As he led them through the restaurant, he made a deliberate choice, directing them to a table near the back, close to the kitchen doors, a spot that was far from the restaurant's prime seating. James and Vanessa exchanged a glance but said nothing. They were no strangers to subtle slights, but tonight was about their love, not the biases of others. James pulled out Vanessa's chair with a smile, and as they settled into their seats, Vanessa placed her hand over his. "It's a beautiful place," she said, her voice low and calm. "Let's not let anything ruin this." James nodded, squeezing her hand gently. "Tonight is ours." Across the room, Charles returned to his post at the entrance, stealing another glance at the couple. Their poise and grace only deepened his unease. Something about them unsettled him, a quiet defiance that challenged the unspoken rules he had long upheld. He straightened his jacket, his jaw tightening. Charles Montgomery prided himself on maintaining control, but tonight, for reasons he could not yet articulate, he felt that control slipping. And as the evening unfolded, the unease he felt would only grow stronger. The plush interior of Maison Royale was a study in opulence. Velvet drapes hung gracefully from high ceilings, the soft gold accents on the walls catching the warm light from the chandeliers. Servers moved deftly between tables, balancing trays of artfully plated dishes, their movements almost a dance. The hum of quiet conversation among diners created a steady rhythm, underscoring the exclusivity of the space. At the entrance, Charles Montgomery adjusted his tie and surveyed the dining room, his sharp eyes catching every detail. His gaze returned to James and Vanessa Carter, who were now seated near the kitchen doors. He watched them with a mix of unease and curiosity, masking his scrutiny behind a veneer of polite indifference. Charles approached their table, his footsteps muted on the lush carpet. His practiced smile was firmly in place as he greeted them. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, I trust everything is to your satisfaction." James, always composed, looked up with a polite smile. "It's lovely, thank you." Vanessa nodded, her smile soft but restrained. "Yes, the ambiance is beautiful." Charles's gaze flickered to the table's location, a deliberate choice on his part. It was close enough to the bustling kitchen to remind diners that their place there was not entirely secure, yet far enough from the prime seating area to maintain the illusion of hospitality. He prided himself on subtlety, and this placement was no exception. "I'm delighted to hear that," Charles said, his tone smooth but impersonal. "Maison Royale prides itself on providing an unparalleled dining experience. I like to personally ensure that all our guests feel welcomed and attended to." There was something in his delivery, a forced edge to his words, that didn't sit right with Vanessa. She exchanged a subtle glance with James, her brow arching slightly. Years of navigating microaggressions had honed her ability to read between the lines, and this was no exception. "We appreciate your attention to detail," Vanessa replied evenly, her voice carrying a quiet strength. "It's one of the reasons we chose to celebrate our anniversary here." The mention of their anniversary seemed to catch Charles off guard for a moment, his smile faltering before he quickly recovered. "Ah, an anniversary. Congratulations. That's certainly a milestone worth celebrating." "Thank you," James said, his tone polite but firm. 10 years of building something meaningful together. It's important to take time to honor that." Charles nodded, but his eyes betrayed a flicker of something unspoken. He cleared his throat and stepped back. "Well, I'll leave you to enjoy your evening. If there's anything you need, don't hesitate to let me know." As he turned to leave, Vanessa leaned slightly toward James. "Near the kitchen," she said softly, her tone laced with irony. "That's a first," James chuckled under his breath, his calm demeanor unshaken. "They must think the view of the waitstaff is part of the ambiance." Vanessa allowed herself a small smile, though her eyes remained sharp. She glanced around the dining room, noting the other tables filled with patrons who seemed blissfully unaware of the subtle discrimination playing out before them. The couple seated in the center of the room exuded privilege and ease, their laughter and conversation filling the air. None of them were seated near the kitchen. "It's fine," James said, his voice steady, sensing her simmering frustration. "This is our night, remember? No one can take that from us." Vanessa nodded, her resolve hardening. "You're right. Let's make the most of it." But the moment lingered between them, an unspoken reminder of the barriers they had faced before and would continue to face. While they had come to celebrate their love and achievements, the shadow of prejudice had followed them even here, in a place where they had hoped to feel nothing but joy. From across the room, Charles watched their interaction with a growing unease. Despite his attempts to assert control, James and Vanessa exuded an effortless dignity that seemed to unsettle him. It wasn't their attire or their reservation that had caught his attention. It was their confidence, their quiet defiance of the unspoken rules he had built his restaurant around. The dining area of Maison Royale was alive with activity. Laughter echoed from tables filled with polished patrons, the clink of glasses and soft scrape of cutlery underscoring an atmosphere of luxury. Waiters moved with practiced grace, delivering plates adorned with delicate arrangements of haute cuisine. The room was a carefully curated symphony of elegance. But for James and Vanessa Carter, a discordant note lingered. Seated near the kitchen, James and Vanessa exchanged quiet conversation, their anticipation for the evening holding steady despite the undercurrent of unease. Vanessa glanced at the table nearest them, where a young couple had already been served their appetizers, a dish Vanessa recognized from the menu as the same one she had ordered. The realization made her pause, but she chose to say nothing, instead meeting James's calm gaze with a small smile. Minutes stretched into what felt like an eternity. Other tables received their meals promptly, the waitstaff delivering plates with flourish and professionalism. Yet, for James and Vanessa, the wait grew conspicuous. Their server passed by several times, each time offering a nervous glance but avoiding eye contact. The tension was subtle, yet unmistakable. Vanessa leaned slightly toward James, her voice low. "We've been here for almost 30 minutes, and not a single appetizer." James nodded, his expression unreadable. "They're trying to send a message." "And failing spectacularly," Vanessa replied, her tone edged with quiet steel. "I won't give them the satisfaction." A waiter finally approached, balancing 2 small plates on a tray. His hands trembled slightly as he placed the dishes in front of James and Vanessa. His words rushed. "Apologies for the delay. The kitchen's been unusually busy tonight." Vanessa raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. James thanked the waiter with a nod, his tone polite but firm. "Thank you. We'll let you know if we need anything else." The waiter nodded quickly and hurried away, leaving them alone once again. Vanessa examined her plate, the elegant presentation doing little to mask the bitterness simmering beneath her composed exterior. James reached for his glass of water, his movements deliberate and calm. "We knew this might happen. Let's not let them dictate our evening." Vanessa exhaled slowly, nodding. "You're right. It's just frustrating. We came here to celebrate, not to navigate someone's outdated biases." "And that's exactly why we'll rise above it," James said, his voice steady. "We've dealt with worse." As the couple resumed their conversation, their poise became their quiet stand against the subtle discrimination. They refused to allow the delays and microaggressions to spoil their evening. Instead, they focused on each other, on the reason they had come, to celebrate a decade of love, resilience, and triumph. From across the room, Charles Montgomery observed them with a mix of irritation and discomfort. Despite his calculated efforts, James and Vanessa remained unshaken, their confidence a silent rebuke to his prejudice. The staff, too, seemed on edge, their glances toward Charles frequent and furtive, as though seeking guidance on how to navigate the unspoken tension. Charles's discomfort deepened as he watched the Carters laugh quietly together, their bond unbreakable despite his attempts to undermine their evening. He had expected frustration, perhaps even an outburst, something that would justify his underlying assumptions. Instead, their composure left him feeling powerless, as though the control he prided himself on was slipping through his fingers. As the evening wore on, James and Vanessa's grace in the face of mistreatment began to shift the atmosphere. Nearby diners, initially oblivious to the couple's treatment, started to take notice. Whispered conversations rippled through the room, subtle yet pointed, as patrons observed the delay in service and the visible discomfort of the staff. James caught one of these murmurs and glanced toward Vanessa, a small, knowing smile on his lips. "Looks like the room's starting to catch on." Vanessa smirked, her confidence returning. "Good. Let them see." By the time their main courses finally arrived, nearly an hour later, James and Vanessa had reclaimed the evening on their terms. Their quiet dignity spoke louder than any confrontation could have, turning what was meant to diminish them into a moment of strength. As they began to eat, Vanessa cast a glance toward the dining room's center, where Charles stood watching them. For the first time that evening, she met his gaze directly, holding it just long enough to send an unspoken message. "We see you, and we will not be moved." Charles looked away, unsettled, and returned to his post by the entrance. The tables had begun to turn, though he didn't yet realize just how far. The quiet clink of silverware and low hum of conversation filled the dining room of Maison Royale, but at the table near the kitchen, the tension was palpable. James and Vanessa Carter maintained their composure, their soft conversation punctuated by glances that conveyed mutual understanding. Yet, the undercurrent of hostility in the room remained undeniable, simmering just beneath the surface. As they finished their appetizers, Charles Montgomery made his move. With a practiced air of authority, he approached their table, his polished shoes clicking softly against the hardwood floor. His carefully composed smile was more a mask than a gesture of genuine hospitality. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter," Charles said smoothly, his voice oozing a thin veneer of concern. "I hope you're enjoying your evening." James looked up from his plate, his expression calm but his eyes sharp. "We are, thank you." Charles hesitated, as though weighing his words. Finally, he leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice just enough to make the moment feel uncomfortably intimate. "I couldn't help but notice some challenges in ensuring that your dining experience meets the standards we hold ourselves to here at Maison Royale." Vanessa raised an eyebrow, her fingers tightening momentarily around her fork. "Challenges?" she asked, her voice steady but edged with curiosity. Charles smiled thinly, ignoring her tone. "Yes, well, Maison Royale prides itself on being an exclusive establishment, catering to a very specific clientele. It's possible that tonight might not be the best fit for your celebration. I'd hate for you to feel uncomfortable." Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her poise flickering for the first time that evening. The implication in Charles's words was unmistakable, his condescension wrapped in a thin veil of professionalism. James placed a calming hand on her arm, silently urging her to stay composed. Vanessa, however, couldn't let it slide. She leaned forward slightly, her voice sharp but controlled. "I see. And what exactly do you mean by a specific clientele, Mr. Montgomery?" Charles straightened, his smile faltering ever so slightly under her unwavering gaze. "I only meant," he said, his tone still syrupy but now tinged with defensiveness, "that we aim to provide an atmosphere suited to our patrons' expectations. Sometimes not every guest feels at home here." Vanessa tilted her head, her expression a mixture of incredulity and determination. "Well, it's a good thing we're not here for your assumptions, isn't it? We're here to celebrate a milestone, and our comfort isn't determined by your prejudices." Charles's mouth opened slightly, but Vanessa didn't give him the chance to respond. "Let me make something clear," she continued, her voice steady but brimming with quiet strength. "Your job is to provide hospitality, not to judge who belongs here. And believe me, we more than belong." James gently tightened his grip on her arm, a silent signal that was as much about their shared strategy as it was about maintaining their dignity. Vanessa glanced at him, her fire cooling slightly as she exhaled. James turned his attention to Charles, his voice calm and measured. "Mr. Montgomery, it's clear that this evening is not progressing as we'd hoped. We won't inconvenience you any further. Please have our check prepared." Charles blinked, momentarily caught off guard. "Oh, there's no need for that. We'd be happy to—" "No," James interrupted, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "We'll settle the bill and leave." Vanessa stood, smoothing the fabric of her dress with deliberate grace. "We've already seen enough of Maison Royale to know it's not worth our time," she said, her voice like steel wrapped in silk. She met Charles's gaze one last time, her eyes conveying all the disdain she didn't bother to vocalize. "Good evening, Mr. Montgomery." James and Vanessa walked toward the entrance with their heads held high, leaving behind the hushed whispers of nearby diners and the lingering tension that Charles had so carefully orchestrated. As they reached the door, the maitre d' approached with the check, his expression fraught with unease. James settled it quickly, leaving a generous tip for the staff, a pointed contrast to the evening's treatment. Outside, the cool night air greeted them like a balm. Vanessa paused, taking a steadying breath as she looked up at James. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I shouldn't have let him get to me." James smiled softly, slipping an arm around her waist. "You didn't let him get to you," he said. "You spoke your truth. There's nothing wrong with that." Vanessa's lips curved into a small, rueful smile. "Still, I wish we hadn't had to deal with any of it. Tonight was supposed to be about us." James kissed her temple gently. It still is. No one, especially not someone like Charles Montgomery, can take that away from us. As they walked toward their car, Vanessa glanced back at the glowing sign of Maison Royale. Do you think he realizes what he just did? James chuckled softly, a note of determination in his voice. Not yet, but he will. Their car pulled away from the curb, merging seamlessly into the flow of traffic. The city lights flickered around them, casting fleeting shadows across their faces. For a while, neither of them spoke, the hum of the engine filling the silence as they each turned over the night's events in their minds. Finally, Vanessa broke the quiet. It's going to take a lot of work, she said, her voice measured but resolute. That place is stuck in the past, James. It's not just the decor. It's the entire culture. Everything about it screams exclusion. James nodded, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. I know, he said simply. But that's why we're doing this. It's not just about us, Vanessa. It's about what that restaurant represents and what it could become. Vanessa turned to face him, her expression softening. Do you think it's worth it? She asked, her voice quieter now. Taking on something so deeply ingrained? James glanced at her briefly, his eyes warm but filled with resolve. Absolutely, he said. Maison Royale has been a symbol of exclusivity for too long. We have the chance to turn it into something better, a space where everyone feels welcome, where excellence doesn't come with prejudice attached. Vanessa smiled faintly, her heart swelling with pride for the man she had chosen to share her life with. You're right, she said. And if anyone can make it happen, it's us. By the time they reached their home, the tension of the evening had been replaced with a renewed sense of purpose. In their cozy living room, surrounded by bookshelves and family photos, they set to work. Vanessa retrieved her laptop, while James pulled out a sleek black notebook filled with notes and figures. This isn't just about buying a restaurant, Vanessa said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. It's about redefining what spaces like Maison Royale can stand for. We're not just acquiring a business, we're starting a movement. James grinned, his pen scratching against the paper as he made adjustments to their proposal. And we'll do it our way, with integrity, vision, and a focus on what matters most: the people. They worked late into the night, their ideas taking shape with each passing hour. Plans for renovations, staffing changes, and a complete rebranding of Maison Royale began to materialize, all centered around their shared values of inclusivity, respect, and excellence. As the first rays of dawn crept through the curtains, James leaned back in his chair, his notebook now filled with a roadmap for the future. Vanessa closed her laptop with a satisfied sigh, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. This is just the beginning, she said, her voice brimming with excitement. James reached across the table, taking her hand in his. And it's going to be extraordinary, he said firmly. Maison Royale will finally become what it should have been all along. Together they rose, their hands still entwined, ready to turn the page on a new chapter, not just for themselves, but for a community yearning for a place where everyone could belong. The conference room at Harrington & Associates was an epitome of sleek professionalism. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a dazzling view of the city skyline, while polished oak furniture and understated decor exuded an air of authority. Charles Montgomery sat at one end of the long table, his fingers drumming impatiently on the glossy surface. He had received an unexpected summons regarding a prospective sale of Maison Royale, an inquiry he hadn't sought out but couldn't afford to ignore. The room was silent save for the occasional rustle of papers and the faint hum of the city below. Charles adjusted his tailored jacket, straightened his silk tie, and checked his watch for the third time in as many minutes. This meeting had piqued his curiosity. Why such urgency? And more importantly, who was behind it? The door opened, and Charles turned sharply, his professional mask firmly in place. His practiced smile faltered for a fraction of a second when James and Vanessa Carter stepped inside, accompanied by a team of lawyers and advisors. They were impeccably dressed, their presence commanding attention. Charles's eyes widened slightly as recognition dawned, and his mind scrambled to piece together what this meant. "Mr. Montgomery," James said smoothly, extending a hand as he approached. "Thank you for meeting with us." Charles hesitated, then took the offered handshake, his grip firm but his composure wavering. "Of course," he said, his voice betraying a hint of uncertainty. "I wasn't expecting you." Vanessa offered a polite smile, her gaze steady and unwavering. "We appreciate your time, Mr. Montgomery," she said. "Shall we get started?" As they took their seats across from Charles, the balance of power in the room shifted palpably. Charles, accustomed to being the one in control, now felt the unfamiliar weight of vulnerability. He cleared his throat, attempting to regain his footing. "So," he began, folding his hands on the table, "you're the prospective buyers?" "We are," James confirmed, his tone calm but firm. "Vanessa and I have a vested interest in Maison Royale, as you're aware." Charles's stomach tightened, but he managed a strained smile. "Well, I must admit, this is a bit of a surprise. What exactly is it that you're proposing?" Vanessa opened a sleek black portfolio, sliding a document across the table toward Charles. "We're prepared to make a generous offer for Maison Royale," she said. "This includes a valuation above the current market rate, which we believe reflects not only the restaurant's existing reputation, but also its potential under new ownership." Charles picked up the document, scanning the figures with a practiced eye. His eyebrows lifted slightly. This was indeed a lucrative offer, one that exceeded even his most optimistic expectations. But before he could react, Vanessa continued. "There are, of course, a few conditions," she said, her voice measured but unyielding. "We'll need your full cooperation to ensure a smooth transition." Charles's eyes narrowed. "Conditions?" he echoed, setting the document down. "What kind of conditions?" James leaned forward, his demeanor calm but resolute. "First, the sale must be finalized quickly. No delays, no drawn-out negotiations. We're ready to proceed immediately, and we expect the same from you." Charles nodded slowly, his mind racing. This wasn't unusual in high-stakes deals, but something in James's tone made it clear there was more to come. "And second," Vanessa added, her gaze locking onto Charles's, "you will step away entirely once the sale is complete. No public statements, no involvement in the restaurant's future. Maison Royale will be ours to reshape, and we'll need you to respect that." Charles stiffened, the words landing like a blow. "Step away entirely," he repeated, his voice tinged with indignation. "Do you understand what you're asking? Maison Royale is my life's work." "We do," James said evenly. "But this isn't just about the business. It's about the culture you've cultivated there. A culture that excludes rather than embraces. We plan to change that, and your continued presence would only complicate matters." The tension in the conference room was palpable, a stark contrast to the polished elegance of its surroundings. Charles Montgomery sat at the head of the table, his posture stiff, his hands gripping the armrests of his chair, as though they were the last things tethering him to control. Across from him sat James and Vanessa Carter, their expressions calm and resolute, their lawyers flanking them with the silent assurance of victory. For Charles, the walls felt as though they were closing in. He had spent the last hour listening to the terms being laid out, each clause a tightening noose. His business, his pride, his very identity, everything was slipping away. The offer was generous, there was no denying that, but the conditions grated against the core of who he was. "You're asking me to walk away from my life's work," Charles said finally, his voice strained but sharp. "Do you have any idea what that means to me? This restaurant isn't just a business, it's my legacy." James leaned forward slightly, his expression steady but firm. "We understand that, Mr. Montgomery," he said. "But you need to understand this isn't just about what the restaurant has been. It's about what it can become. Maison Royale has the potential to thrive, but it needs to stand for something more than exclusivity." Vanessa chimed in, her tone poised yet unyielding. "This is about building a legacy that endures, one that represents excellence and inclusivity. To achieve that, we need complete control, without interference or lingering associations." Charles clenched his jaw, his gaze darting to the legal document in front of him. It was a straightforward agreement, one that guaranteed him a significant financial payout, more than enough to retire comfortably. But the fine print made it clear. He would relinquish all involvement in Maison Royale, including the right to publicly comment on its operations or future. His pride screamed at him to refuse, to fight back and hold on to the establishment he had poured his life into. But the rational part of his mind, the part honed by years of business dealings, knew better. The Carters had the upper hand. The threat of public backlash, combined with the financial incentive, left him with little choice. "You're putting me in an impossible position," Charles said bitterly, glaring across the table. Vanessa's gaze didn't waver. "No, Mr. Montgomery," she said evenly. "Your actions put you in this position. We're offering you a way forward, a dignified exit and financial security. It's more than fair." Charles bristled at her words, but he knew she was right. The events of that fateful evening, the way he had dismissed and disrespected the Carters, had come back to haunt him in ways he couldn't have imagined. Refusing this deal would only bring more scrutiny, more questions, and potentially the collapse of everything he had built. With a heavy sigh, Charles slumped back in his chair. "Fine," he said, the word laden with defeat. "I'll agree to the terms." A flicker of satisfaction passed across James's face, though he remained composed. "We appreciate your cooperation," he said. "Our goal is to ensure a smooth transition for everyone involved." The lawyers moved quickly, finalizing the agreement and ensuring all parties signed. Charles's hand trembled slightly as he scrawled his name on the dotted line, each stroke of the pen feeling like a blow to his pride. When the last signature was in place, the Carters' lead attorney stood, announcing the completion of the transaction. "Congratulations," the lawyer said, addressing James and Vanessa. "Maison Royale is officially yours." Charles sat frozen as the words sank in. It was done. The restaurant he had built from the ground up, the symbol of his success, now belonged to someone else. And not just anyone. James and Vanessa Carter, the very couple he had deemed unworthy of stepping through its doors. As the Carters stood to leave, James extended his hand once more. "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery," he said. "We'll take good care of Maison Royale." Charles shook his hand stiffly, unable to summon any response beyond a curt nod. Vanessa offered a polite but firm smile. "We wish you all the best in your future endeavors," she said. And with that, they left the room, their team of advisors following close behind. Charles sat alone at the table, the legal documents before him a stark reminder of the weight of his choices. The transfer of power was complete, and the realization hit him like a tidal wave. Maison Royale was no longer his. He had traded the legacy he had so tightly clung to for financial security, but it felt hollow. As much as he tried to rationalize his decision, he couldn't escape the gnawing sense of loss, the bitter knowledge that his own prejudice had cost him everything. Charles remained seated long after the room had emptied, staring blankly at the city skyline. For the first time in his life, he felt the full weight of his actions. The bridges burned, the opportunities squandered, and the empire he had built now thriving in hands more capable and compassionate than his own. Maison Royale stood resplendent under the soft glow of the city's evening lights, its grand facade hinting at the elegance within. Yet, something had changed. The once intimidating exclusivity that had cloaked the restaurant was replaced by an inviting air, one that promised sophistication without pretension. Under the leadership of James and Vanessa Carter, the famed establishment was entering a new chapter, one that would redefine its identity and legacy. Inside, the Carters' vision had taken form. The classic elegance of Maison Royale remained, but with meaningful updates that reflected the values they held dear. The dining area featured refined touches, a harmonious blend of modern art and timeless design. Rich neutral tones were complemented by bursts of vibrant color, celebrating the diversity of cultures and stories that the restaurant now welcomed. The menu, too, had undergone a transformation. While retaining some of the classic French cuisine that had defined its reputation, the Carters introduced a selection of dishes inspired by global flavors. Each plate was crafted with precision, a testament to the restaurant's commitment to excellence. Local ingredients were highlighted, and a special section of the menu honored cuisines from underrepresented culinary traditions, offering patrons a rich tapestry of flavors. James and Vanessa's philosophy extended beyond the aesthetics and the menu. They made inclusivity a cornerstone of the restaurant's culture. The staff now reflected a variety of backgrounds, and every employee was trained to uphold a standard of respect and hospitality that embodied the Carters' vision. Maison Royale was no longer a place defined by who wasn't welcome. It was a space where everyone belonged. Word spread quickly about the new Maison Royale. Guests who once felt out of place now found themselves greeted with warmth and genuine hospitality. The Carters made it a point to host community nights, where a portion of proceeds supported local charities. They also opened their doors for mentorship events, providing opportunities for young chefs and aspiring restaurateurs to learn from their success. The Carters' efforts resonated deeply with the city. Maison Royale became more than a restaurant. It was a symbol of progress, a testament to the power of transformation and the impact of leadership rooted in values. Families, professionals, and community leaders filled its tables, their conversations and laughter weaving a new rhythm into the restaurant's story. The media took notice as well. Articles praised the Carters for their bold approach, noting how they had preserved Maison Royale's prestige while making it accessible and relevant for a modern, diverse audience. Critics who had once lauded the restaurant for its exclusivity now celebrated it for its humanity. The Carters' ability to balance refinement with inclusion became a case study in the industry. On a particularly busy evening, James and Vanessa stood by the entrance, watching as guests arrived. A young couple entered, their wide-eyed amazement reminding the Carters of why they had embarked on this journey. Vanessa turned to James, a smile of quiet satisfaction on her face. "This is what it's about," she said, gesturing toward the room filled with people from all walks of life. "A place where everyone feels welcome and valued." James nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "We've turned what was once a barrier into a bridge. That's the legacy I want us to leave." Later that night, as the last of the guests departed and the lights dimmed, James and Vanessa walked through the restaurant together. The once tense air of Maison Royale had been replaced by an atmosphere of warmth and purpose. They had taken a symbol of division and turned it into a celebration of unity. Maison Royale flourished under the Carters' leadership, not just as a business, but as a beacon of what could be achieved when courage and vision met opportunity. For those who entered its doors, it offered more than a meal. It offered hope and a reminder that change was possible. The story of Maison Royale became an inspiration, shared in articles, speeches, and classrooms. James and Vanessa were often invited to discuss their journey, and they used every platform to emphasize the importance of standing for one's values and embracing the power of community. As Maison Royale entered its new era, its name took on a new meaning. No longer did it represent exclusivity and rigid tradition. Instead, it became synonymous with progress, elegance, and the transformative power of inclusion. For James and Vanessa, it was not just a restaurant, but a movement. A promise that the best legacies are those that uplift and unite. The Carters had not only redefined Maison Royale, they had proven that true success lies in the ability to evolve and inspire. Their story became a testament to resilience, purpose, and the enduring belief that change, no matter how daunting, was always worth pursuing. As Maison Royale thrives under James and Vanessa Carter's leadership, it becomes more than just a restaurant. It stands as a beacon of hope and change. The Carters have proven that elegance and inclusivity are not mutually exclusive, but rather the perfect recipe for success. Their journey reminds us all that resilience, grace, and determination can transform even the most challenging moments into powerful opportunities for growth. This story serves as a reminder. When faced with prejudice, we have the power to rise above, take a stand, and inspire change. James and Vanessa turned a moment of discrimination into a legacy of unity, proving that true success is built on the foundation of respect and equality. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that remind us of the strength in love, resilience, and transformation. Together, we can make a difference.